Peace be upon you, and welcome to our journey together today. Take a moment to settle in wherever you are, whether you're at home with a cup of tea, taking a quiet break from your day, or finding a peaceful corner to learn and reflect. Over the next hour and a half, we're going to explore 3 interconnected chapters of the Qur'an that paint a breathtaking picture of our universe. Take a moment to slow down, breathe, and join this peaceful study of Allah's words. If you find comfort here, please like, subscribe, and share so more hearts can pause and reflect with us. Our purpose and our ultimate destiny. These are chapters that speak to the very heart of what it means to be human in this vast cosmos. You don't need to know Arabic. You don't need years of study. You just need an open heart and a curious mind. Whether you're a Muslim seeking to deepen your connection to the Qur'an or someone genuinely interested in understanding one of humanity's most influential texts, you're exactly where you need to be. So let's begin this gentle exploration together. Let's discover not just what these verses say, but what they might mean for our lives today, in our modern world, with all its joys and challenges. Ready? Let's start this peaceful journey of discovery. Now that we've settled in together, let's travel back in time, not just to understand when these words were revealed, but to truly feel the world in which they first touched human hearts. Picture Mecca in the late 7th century. It's a bustling crossroads of trade, where caravans from distant lands converge in the shadow of the Kaaba. The air is thick with the sounds of commerce, the calls of merchants, and the whispered conversations of tribal leaders. This is a society built on honor, lineage, and material success. The wealthy elite hold court, their influence radiating through the community like ripples in a pond. Into this world came Muhammad, peace be upon him, with a message that would challenge everything they knew about power, success, and human worth. The 3 chapters we're exploring today were revealed during this tumultuous period, each one addressing the deep spiritual questions that arose as this new understanding of reality began to take root. Surah An-Nasiyat, Those Who Pull Out, was revealed during the Meccan period when the message of Islam was still new, still shocking to those who heard it. Imagine the impact of these words on people who had never seriously contemplated life after death, who saw this earthly existence as the sum total of human experience. The chapter opens with cosmic imagery so powerful it must have left listeners breathless, describing celestial forces beyond their comprehension yet intimately connected to their daily lives. The historical context is crucial here. The Meccan elite, comfortable in their earthly power, were being told that there was a greater reality, a cosmic order that made their temporary influence seem insignificant. The chapter speaks of resurrection with such vivid detail that it couldn't be dismissed as mere poetry. This wasn't just theology. It was a complete reframing of human existence. Surah Abasa, He frowned, emerged from a very specific moment that teaches us something profound about divine priorities. Picture this scene. The Prophet is speaking with some influential leaders from Mecca, hoping to win their hearts to Islam. In the midst of this crucial conversation, a blind man named Abdullah ibn Maktum approaches, seeking spiritual guidance. The Prophet, concerned about the delicate diplomatic moment, shows slight annoyance at the interruption. What happens next reveals the beautiful character of divine revelation. God gently corrects this very human moment, not with harsh criticism but with a profound lesson about spiritual equality and the true measure of human worth. This wasn't just about one incident. It was establishing a revolutionary principle that would echo through the centuries, that social status, wealth, and influence mean nothing in the spiritual realm. The timing of this revelation is fascinating. Islam was still struggling for acceptance among the powerful, yet here was a divine message saying that the sincere seeker, regardless of social standing, was more valuable than all the influential chiefs combined. This must have been both humbling and liberating for the early Muslim community. Surah At-Takwir, the overthrowing, paints perhaps the most vivid picture of cosmic transformation found anywhere in the Qur'an, revealed during a time when the message of accountability was being established. It addresses those who questioned whether their actions really mattered in the grand scheme of things. The Arabian Peninsula of that era was a place where tribal customs often overruled moral considerations. The practice of female infanticide mentioned in the chapter was a stark reality of pre-Islamic society, where daughters were sometimes seen as economic burdens. Into this moral landscape came verses that would fundamentally transform how society viewed human life and divine justice. These three chapters work together like movements in a cosmic symphony. An-Nasiyat establishes the reality of divine power and resurrection. Abasa teaches us about spiritual equality and divine priorities. At-Takwir reveals the ultimate accountability that awaits every soul. Together, they formed part of the foundation that would transform not just individual hearts but entire civilizations. The people who first heard these words were living through one of history's greatest spiritual revolutions. They were witnessing the birth of a worldview that would spread across continents and through centuries. Yet the message wasn't delivered as abstract philosophy. It came through poetry so beautiful, imagery so powerful, and truth so accessible, that illiterate merchants and sophisticated scholars alike found themselves moved to tears. As we prepare to dive deeper into these magnificent chapters, remember that we're not just studying ancient texts, we're exploring timeless truths about our universe, our purpose, and our destiny. The same cosmic forces described in these verses continue to operate today. The same divine mercy that corrected a moment of human oversight still guides us. The same ultimate reality that awaited those first listeners awaits us all. Before we begin our detailed exploration, let's take a moment to understand what we're about to encounter. These three chapters are like windows opening onto different aspects of the same infinite reality, each one revealing truths that complement and deepen the others. Surah An-Nasiyat, whose name means those who pull out, or those who tear out, gets its title from the opening verses that describe angels carrying out their divine duties with varying degrees of force and gentleness. This isn't just a poetic description, it's an introduction to the fundamental reality that unseen forces govern our universe in ways we can barely comprehend. The chapter contains 46 verses and is considered one of the more intense Meccan revelations, dealing primarily with resurrection, divine power, and the ultimate accountability that awaits all creation. What makes An-Nasiyat particularly striking is how it weaves together cosmic imagery with historical narrative. It begins with oaths sworn by celestial beings, moves through the terror and wonder of resurrection, then grounds these abstract concepts in the very concrete story of Moses confronting Pharaoh. This isn't accidental structure. It's showing us that the same divine power operating in the cosmos also works through human history, and the same forces that will resurrect the dead have already been demonstrated through the rise and fall of earthly kingdoms. The chapter's central theme revolves around the question that haunts every human heart: what happens when we die? But it doesn't approach this question philosophically. Instead, it answers with the full force of divine authority, describing resurrection not as a possibility, but as an inevitable reality, backed by the same power that maintains the orbits of planets and the cycles of day and night. Surah Abasa, meaning he frowned, takes its name from the opening verse describing the prophet's momentary reaction to being interrupted during an important conversation. This chapter spans 42 verses and represents one of the most beautiful examples of divine correction in the entire Qur'an. But calling it a correction almost misses the point. It's more like a gentle redirection that reveals profound truths about spiritual priorities and human worth. The themes in Abasa are revolutionary in their implications. Here we see that social status, political influence, and material wealth count for nothing in the divine calculus. The sincere seeker, even one society might overlook or marginalize, is infinitely more valuable than the proud elite who resist truth. This wasn't just a lesson for the prophet, it was establishing a principle that would transform how the Muslim community understood leadership, education, and social responsibility. But Abasa doesn't stop with social commentary. It moves seamlessly from human interactions to cosmic observations, reminding us of our origins and our dependence on divine providence. The chapter traces the human journey from the most humble beginnings to the ultimate accountability, using the imagery of agriculture and sustenance to show how completely we depend on forces beyond our control. Surah At-Takwir, the overthrowing or the folding up, derives its name from the opening verse describing the sun being folded up or overthrown. This chapter, with its 29 verses, presents perhaps the most vivid and poetic description of the Day of Judgment found anywhere in religious literature. But it's not trying to frighten. It's trying to awaken us to the magnitude of what we're all moving toward. The themes in At-Takwir are both cosmic and intensely personal. It begins with a series of dramatic transformations that will occur in the natural world, each image more stunning than the last. Stars falling, mountains moving like clouds, wild animals gathering together, seas bursting into flame. Yet in the midst of this cosmic upheaval, the chapter zeroes in on individual accountability and the reunion of souls with their deeds. What's particularly powerful about At-Takwir is how it connects the transformation of the external universe with the revelation of internal realities. When the scrolls of deeds are laid open and paradise is brought near, we're seeing the moment when all pretense falls away, and every soul sees exactly what it has earned through its choices in this life. Together, these three chapters form what we might call a cosmic trilogy, and At-Takwir establishes the reality and power behind resurrection. Abasa teaches us about divine values and priorities in the here and now. At-Takwir reveals the ultimate unveiling when all hidden things become manifest. They share common themes of accountability, divine power, and the temporary nature of this worldly life, but each approaches these themes from a unique angle. The progression is also significant. We move from the cosmic forces described in At-Takwir to the intimate human moment in Abasa, to the ultimate cosmic transformation in At-Takwir. It's as if we're being shown that the same divine attention governs the movement of galaxies and the interaction between a prophet and a blind seeker of knowledge. As we prepare to dive into the specific verses, keep this larger picture in mind. We're not just studying three separate chapters, we're exploring three facets of a single magnificent reality that encompasses everything from the smallest human gesture to the greatest cosmic event. Now, let's pause for a moment and allow these sacred words to wash over us in their original form. Even though we won't be reading the Arabic text together, there's something profoundly moving about hearing these verses as they were first revealed. The rhythm, the flow, the rise and fall of the recitation carries meaning that transcends language barriers. As you listen, don't worry about understanding every word. Instead, let yourself feel the emotional journey these chapters take us on. Notice how An-Nazi'at begins with short, powerful bursts of sound that mirror the forceful imagery being described. The recitation seems to pull and tug at something deep within us, just as the angels described in the opening verses pull out souls with varying degrees of intensity. The beauty of Quranic recitation lies not just in its melodic qualities, but in how the sound itself becomes a form of meaning. When you hear the verses describing the resurrection in An-Nazi'at, listen for how the reciter's voice might drop to a whisper for the fearful questioning of the disbelievers, then rise with authority when describing Allah's power over creation. This isn't just artistic interpretation, it's the natural response of the human voice to the profound emotions embedded in these words. As we move into Surah Abasa, notice how the tone shifts. The opening verses carry a gentleness that reflects the divine mercy being shown even in correction. There's no harshness here, no anger, just a loving redirection that teaches profound lessons about priorities and values. Many reciters will slow down during the central passages describing human creation and divine providence, allowing each image to settle in the listener's heart. The recitation of agricultural imagery in Abasa often takes on an almost celebratory quality. When describing how water is poured forth, how the earth splits open, how grains and fruits and gardens emerge, you can hear joy in the reciter's voice. This isn't just poetry, it's gratitude made audible, recognition of the countless blessings we often take for granted. Surah At-Takwir presents perhaps the greatest challenge and opportunity for reciters. The opening verses describing cosmic upheaval demand a dramatic delivery that can make listeners feel the earth-shaking reality being described. Yet skilled reciters know how to build and release tension, how to make the folding up of the sun feel both terrifying and magnificent. Listen for how the recitation handles the transition from cosmic imagery to personal accountability in At-Takwir. Many reciters will shift from the grand sweeping tones used for universal transformation to more intimate, penetrating tones when the focus turns to individual souls and their deeds. This mirrors the chapter's movement from the external to the internal, from the cosmic to the personal. One of the most moving moments in any recitation of these chapters comes with the verses about the buried female infant in At-Takwir. Skilled reciters often pause before these verses, letting the weight of the question settle. For what sin was she killed? The question hangs in the air, demanding an answer that reveals the horror of injustice and the certainty of divine justice. Throughout all three chapters, pay attention to how the recitation handles the divine oaths and declarations. These aren't casual statements, they're solemn pronouncements backed by the full authority of creation itself. When you hear oaths sworn by the stars, by the night, by the dawn, the reciter's voice often carries a weight that makes you feel you're witnessing something sacred and momentous. The closing verses of each chapter deserve special attention. An-Nazi'at ends with a reminder about the hour and human perception of time. Notice how reciters often deliver these final verses with a sense of urgency tempered by mystery. Abasa concludes with vivid descriptions of faces on the day of judgment, some bright with joy, others darkened with despair. The contrast is often reflected in how the reciter modulates between hope and warning. At-Takwir's conclusion is particularly powerful, reminding us that this Qur'an is guidance for all creation, but only for those who will to walk straight. The final verse acknowledges human choice while affirming divine sovereignty, and skilled reciters capture this beautiful tension between human responsibility and divine control. As you listen to these recitations, remember that millions of people throughout history have found comfort, guidance, and transformation through these very same sounds. The businessman stressed about his career, the mother worried about her children, the student facing uncertain futures, the elderly person contemplating mortality, all have found in these recitations something that speaks directly to their deepest needs and fears. The recitation serves as a bridge between the historical context we've explored and the detailed meanings we're about to discover. It reminds us that these aren't just ancient texts to be analyzed, but living words that continue to move hearts and change lives. Let the beauty of the recitation prepare your heart for the profound truths we're about to explore together in our detailed examination of each verse. Now that our hearts have been prepared by the beauty of the recitation, let's walk through these verses together with clear, accessible translations that help us understand exactly what's being communicated. We'll move through each chapter systematically, ensuring that every concept is clear and every image is vivid in our minds. Let's begin with Surah An-Nazi'at. The opening verses present us with a series of powerful oaths, each one revealing different aspects of divine activity in our universe. By those who pull out with great violence. This refers to the angels who extract the souls of those who have rejected truth, those who resist the natural flow of existence. The pulling is described as violent, not because of cruelty, but because of the resistance encountered when someone has spent their life fighting against their own spiritual nature. Immediately following, we hear about those who gently take out the souls of the believers. Here's a beautiful contrast that reveals divine mercy. The same process, the transition from this life to the next, occurs with gentleness for those who have lived in harmony with their spiritual purpose. It's like the difference between removing something that's stuck versus lifting something that's ready to move freely. The next verses describe beings that swim along and press forward as in a race and arrange to do the commands of their Lord. These images paint a picture of a universe in constant purposeful motion. Everything from the smallest particle to the largest galaxy is engaged in fulfilling divine purpose with enthusiasm and precision. We're being shown that we live in a cosmos that's alive with intentional activity, not random chaos. Then comes the dramatic description of the day of resurrection. The earth and mountains will shake violently. This isn't destruction for its own sake, but transformation. The solid things we depend on for stability will reveal their temporary nature. This is followed by the second blowing that brings everyone back to life, and suddenly we're confronted with the human response to this cosmic reality. Some hearts that day will shake with fear and anxiety, their eyes cast down. Can you feel the terror in these words? These are people suddenly realizing that everything they thought they knew about reality was incomplete. They ask in disbelief, "Shall we indeed be returned to our former state of life, even after we are crumbled bones?" Their response reveals how completely they had dismissed the possibility of life after death. The answer comes swift and certain. But only it will be a single shout, one divine command, and the impossible becomes inevitable. When behold, they find themselves over the earth alive after their death. The word behold here captures the shock, the sudden awareness that what seemed impossible was actually as simple as a single divine word. Moving to Surah Abasa, we encounter one of the most beautifully human moments in the entire Qur'an. The prophet frowned and turned away because there came to him the blind man. This isn't presented as a grave sin, but as a very understandable human reaction. The prophet was engaged in crucial diplomatic work, trying to win influential hearts to Islam, when he was interrupted by someone seeking spiritual guidance. But then comes the gentle divine perspective. But what could tell you that perhaps he might become pure? or that he might receive admonition, and that the admonition might profit him? This question reframes everything. The seemingly less important interruption might actually be the most important spiritual work happening in that moment. The contrast continues. As for him who thinks himself self-sufficient, to him you attend. What does it matter to you if he will not become pure? Here's a profound lesson about spiritual priorities. The person who thinks they don't need guidance often receives the most attention, while the sincere seeker might be overlooked. But divine wisdom sees things differently. But as to him who came to you running and is afraid, of him you are neglectful. The word running here is particularly moving. This describes someone so eager for spiritual guidance that they hurry toward it, someone whose heart is already prepared to receive truth. And afraid doesn't mean terrified, but rather filled with reverent awe, recognizing the weight and importance of spiritual matters. In Surah At-Takwir, we encounter some of the most vivid imagery in religious literature. When the sun is folded up, imagine trying to fold up the source of all life and energy on Earth. This isn't just the end of solar power, it's the end of the entire cosmic order as we know it. And when the stars fall continues this theme of cosmic transformation, showing us that even the most distant and seemingly permanent features of our universe are temporary. And when the mountains are made to pass away, brings this cosmic change down to earth. Mountains, symbols of permanence and stability in human consciousness, will move like clouds. Then comes something even more striking. And when the pregnant she-camels shall be neglected. In Arabian society, pregnant camels represented ultimate wealth and security. This verse suggests that even our most precious earthly possessions will be forgotten in the face of ultimate reality. Now that we've walked through the translations together, let's pause and explore some of the profound concepts these chapters introduce. These aren't just poetic images or historical accounts. They're revelations about the fundamental nature of reality, consciousness, and our place in the cosmic order. One of the most important concepts woven throughout all three chapters is the idea of divine agency operating through natural forces. When An-Nasiyat describes angels who pull out and gently take, we're not meant to imagine this as separate from natural processes, but as the spiritual reality behind what we observe. Modern science describes the cessation of brain function and cellular death, but these verses reveal the conscious, purposeful spiritual activity that governs these transitions. This connects to a crucial understanding: everything in existence operates according to divine will. But this doesn't mean everything happens mechanically. The gentle removal of believing souls versus the violent extraction of resistant ones suggests that our spiritual state affects how we experience universal processes. The same physical death occurs, but the spiritual experience varies dramatically based on how aligned we've become with our deeper purpose. The concept of resurrection presented here challenges our basic assumptions about consciousness and identity. When the verses describe people asking, "Shall we indeed be returned after we are crumbled bones?" they're expressing a materialist viewpoint that equates identity with physical form. But the Quranic response suggests that what we consider our true self-mind, our consciousness, our moral character, our spiritual development, exists independently of our physical bodies. This isn't proposing a simple dualism where soul and body are separate. Rather, it's revealing that consciousness has a continuity that transcends physical form. When At-Takwir describes souls being joined with their bodies, it suggests a reunion, not a first-time creation. Our earthly experience is temporary separation, not the totality of our existence. The agricultural imagery in Abasa introduces another profound concept, the relationship between divine providence and human effort. That we pour forth water in abundance, and we split the earth in clefts, and we cause therein the grain to grow. This describes the foundational processes that make human life possible. But notice what's missing. Any mention of human agricultural work. This isn't denying human agency, but rather putting it in proper perspective. Before we can plant, water must fall. Before water can nourish, earth must be fertile. Before earth can be fertile, cosmic processes must maintain the conditions for life. Our efforts, important as they are, rest upon layers of divine providence, so fundamental we usually take them completely for granted. The concept of spiritual equality revealed in Abasa revolutionizes how we think about human worth and divine attention. The correction given to the prophet wasn't about favoritism, but about recognizing that spiritual sincerity matters more than social status. The blind man's eagerness for guidance made him, in that moment, more valuable to divine purposes than all the influential chiefs combined. This introduces the concept of spiritual meritocracy, where worth is measured not by worldly achievements, but by openness to truth and growth. The person who thinks himself self-sufficient represents the spiritual danger of feeling we don't need guidance, while the one who came running and is afraid embodies the spiritual wisdom of recognizing our need for divine direction. The cosmic transformations described in At-Takwir reveal the concept of ultimate reality versus apparent reality. The sun, stars, and mountains seem permanent from our limited perspective, but they're actually temporary features of a universe in constant flux. When these permanent things are transformed, we're seeing the revelation of what was always true. Only divine reality is truly permanent. This connects to the deeply personal concept of accountability described in these chapters. Every person will know what he has brought. Suggests that moral consequences aren't imposed from outside, but are the natural result of our choices crystallized into visible form. We're not being arbitrarily judged. We're seeing the true nature of what we've been creating through our actions and intentions. The concept of time presented here is particularly fascinating. An-Nasiyat concludes with the observation that when people see the day of judgment, it will be as if they had not tarried except an afternoon or a morning. This suggests that our sense of time's passage is largely illusory. What feels like decades of earthly life might, from the perspective of ultimate reality, be just a brief moment. This connects to the concept of divine knowledge versus human knowledge. The prophet is told you have no knowledge to say anything about it regarding the timing of the hour. This isn't meant as criticism, but as recognition that ultimate reality operates according to principles beyond human comprehension. Our role isn't to know everything, but to live faithfully within the limits of our understanding. Perhaps most importantly, these chapters introduce the concept of choice within divine sovereignty. At-Takwir concludes with "To whomsoever among you who wills to walk straight," followed immediately by "and you will not, unless Allah wills." This isn't contradictory, it's revealing the mysterious relationship between human responsibility and divine control that governs all spiritual development. The most powerful historical narrative woven through these chapters is the story of Moses and Pharaoh, presented in An-Nasiyat, as both historical account and timeless parable. But before we dive into this confrontation between prophet and tyrant, let's understand why this particular story appears in a chapter focused on resurrection and cosmic forces. The story begins with a divine calling. When his Lord called him in the sacred valley of Tuwa, this wasn't just any location. Tuwa was where Moses first encountered the burning bush, where he received his prophetic mission, where the impossible became possible before his very eyes. By returning to this sacred space, the narrative reminds us that what seems impossible to human understanding becomes inevitable when divine power intervenes. Moses is commanded to go to Pharaoh. Verily, he has transgressed all bounds. This simple statement carries profound weight. Pharaoh wasn't just a political ruler. He was someone who had crossed every moral boundary, who had elevated himself beyond all limits of human authority. The phrase transgressed all bounds suggests someone who had lost all sense of proportion, all recognition of his place in the cosmic order. But notice the message Moses is instructed to deliver. Would you purify yourself from the sin of disbelief by becoming a believer, and that I guide you to your Lord so you should fear him? This isn't a threat or a political ultimatum. It's an invitation to spiritual transformation, even to the most powerful tyrant on earth. The divine approach begins with an offer of guidance and purification. The response reveals everything about Pharaoh's spiritual condition. Moses showed him the great sign, but Pharaoh belied and disobeyed. Then he turned his back, striving hard against Allah. Here we see the tragic pattern of rejecting clear evidence. The great sign likely refers to the miraculous transformations Moses demonstrated, his staff becoming a serpent, his hand becoming luminous. These weren't magic tricks. They were demonstrations of divine power breaking through the apparent laws of nature. But Pharaoh's reaction goes beyond simple disbelief. He strived hard against Allah. The Arabic suggests intense, deliberate opposition. This wasn't passive skepticism. It was active rebellion against truth he knew to be real. The progression is telling. First he rejected the evidence. Then he turned away from the messenger. Then he actively campaigned against the divine message. The climax comes with Pharaoh's ultimate declaration. Then he gathered his people and cried aloud, saying, I am your Lord Most High. This moment represents the absolute pinnacle of human arrogance. Not content with political authority, Pharaoh claims divine status itself. He gathers witnesses to his blasphemy, making it a public declaration that transforms personal delusion into societal corruption. The divine response is swift and decisive. So Allah seized him with punishment for his last and first transgression. This refers not just to his claim of divinity, but to the pattern of oppression and arrogance that had characterized his entire reign. The first transgression might refer to his initial rejection of Moses' message, while the last points to his ultimate claim of divinity. Divine justice encompasses the entire arc of moral choices, not just isolated incidents. But the story doesn't end with punishment. It concludes with a lesson. Verily, and this is an instructive admonition for whosoever fears Allah. The entire narrative serves as a warning and guidance for those whose hearts remain open to divine direction. The same forces that brought down the mightiest ruler of the ancient world continue to operate throughout history. This historical account connects directly to the resurrection themes that dominate these chapters. Pharaoh's story demonstrates that divine power can humble the most arrogant human authority, just as that same power will resurrect the dead and establish ultimate justice. The miracles Moses performed were previews of the greater miracle of resurrection that awaits all humanity. The story also illuminates the spiritual dynamics described in Abasa. Just as the blind seeker was more valuable than the influential chiefs because of his spiritual sincerity, Moses, a shepherd with a speech impediment, was given authority over the most powerful empire of his time. Divine values consistently invert worldly hierarchies, elevating the humble and humbling the proud. There's another historical context worth considering: the practice of female infanticide mentioned in At-Takwir. When the female infant buried alive shall be questioned, for what sin was she killed? This wasn't just a pre-Islamic Arabian practice. It represents the broader historical tendency to devalue those society considers expendable. The buried infant becomes a symbol of all injustice, all abuse of the powerless by the powerful. The question, for what sin was she killed, demands an answer that reveals the horror of such practices. The innocent victim becomes the accuser, and those who perpetrated injustice must answer for their crimes. This connects to Pharaoh's story. Both represent the abuse of power against the innocent, and both promise divine justice that may be delayed but is never denied. These historical narratives serve as anchors for the cosmic themes these chapters explore. They show us that the same divine power operating in the resurrection and judgment also worked through human history, establishing patterns of justice and mercy that help us understand what awaits us all. As we sit here in our modern world, surrounded by technology our ancestors could never have imagined, these ancient verses speak to our contemporary struggles with startling relevance. The cosmic forces described in these chapters operate in our lives today just as powerfully as they did 14 centuries ago, though we might not always recognize their presence. Consider the opening images of An-Nasiyat in light of our modern understanding of death and consciousness. Today we have sophisticated medical equipment that can monitor the exact moment when brain activity ceases, when the heart stops beating, when biological functions shut down. Yet these verses remind us that there's a deeper reality beyond what our instruments can measure. The pulling out and gentle taking of souls speaks to the spiritual dimension of death that no MRI scan or EKG can detect. This has profound implications for how we approach end-of-life care, grief, and our understanding of what makes us truly human. In a culture that often reduces human beings to biological machines, these verses insist that our essential nature transcends physical processes. This doesn't diminish the importance of medical care, but it does remind us that healing and wholeness involve more than just biological repair. The agricultural imagery in Abasa resonates powerfully with our contemporary environmental crises. That we pour forth water in abundance, and we split the earth in clefts, reminds us that the fundamental processes sustaining life on Earth operate according to cosmic principles beyond human control. As we face climate change, water scarcity, and soil degradation, these verses call us to remember our complete dependence on divine providence working through natural systems. This perspective transforms how we think about environmental stewardship. We're not independent agents manipulating nature for our benefit. We're participants in a cosmic system that requires our grateful cooperation. The verse listing grapes, olives, date palms, and gardens shows us abundance as divine gift, not human achievement. This humility could revolutionize our approach to sustainability and resource management. The correction given to the prophet in Abasa speaks directly to our modern struggles with social inequality and access to knowledge. In our world of educational gatekeeping, where quality learning often depends on economic status, these verses remind us that spiritual sincerity matters more than social privilege. The eager seeker deserves attention regardless of their background or circumstances. This has revolutionary implications for how we structure education, religious instruction, and social services. The blind man who came running represents everyone who seeks knowledge and growth despite facing barriers others don't encounter. His spiritual eagerness made him more deserving of attention than the wealthy, influential leaders who felt they already had all the answers they needed. Consider how this applies to our digital age, where information is abundant but wisdom remains rare. The person scrolling through social media feeling intellectually superior might be spiritually stagnant, while someone struggling to understand basic concepts but genuinely seeking truth might be far closer to real knowledge. These verses call us to value spiritual hunger over intellectual pride. The cosmic transformations described in At-Takwir take on new meaning in our age of space exploration and astrophysics. When we read about stars falling and the sun being folded up, we might think of supernovas, black holes, and the eventual heat death of the universe that physicists predict. Science has revealed the temporary nature of even the most massive celestial objects, confirming what these verses declared centuries ago. But the real relevance isn't astronomical, it's psychological and spiritual. In our culture of rapid change, where technologies, institutions, and social structures that seemed permanent can disappear almost overnight, these verses remind us that only spiritual realities offer true security. The star we depend on for life, the ground we build our homes on, the economic systems we trust for our future, all are temporary. Only our relationship with ultimate reality provides lasting foundation. The description of people fleeing from family members on the Day of Judgment speaks to our contemporary crisis of isolation and broken relationships. That day shall a man flee from his brother, and from his mother and his father, and from his wife and his children. In an age when family bonds are weakening and community connections are fragmenting, this verse warns that the spiritual emptiness driving our current isolation will become complete separation if we don't address its root causes. Yet there's hope in the image of faces that day will be bright, laughing, rejoicing at good news. This describes people who have found genuine spiritual fulfillment, who have aligned their lives with ultimate purpose. In our age of anxiety, depression, and existential confusion, these verses point toward the joy that comes from living in harmony with cosmic truth. The modern workplace, with its focus on networking, status, and influence, reflects the same spiritual dynamics described in these chapters. The executive who dismisses spiritual concerns while courting important clients mirrors the Meccan chiefs who receive the prophet's attention. Meanwhile, the sincere seeker of meaning, perhaps someone society overlooks, represents the true spiritual priority. These chapters call us to examine our own priorities in light of ultimate reality. In a world obsessed with temporary achievements and material success, they remind us that spiritual development and moral character are what ultimately matter. These 3 chapters don't exist in isolation. They're part of a magnificent tapestry of meaning that weaves throughout the entire Qur'an. When we step back and look at the broader patterns, we discover that the themes explored here echo and amplify messages found across dozens of other chapters, creating a coherent worldview that addresses the deepest questions of human existence. The theme of resurrection that dominates An-Nasiyat appears throughout the Qur'an, but each chapter approaches it from a unique angle. While An-Nasiyat focuses on the cosmic forces behind resurrection, other chapters like Al-Qiyamah describe the personal experience of dying and being raised. Surah Al-Waqiah details the different categories of people and their varying experiences in the afterlife. Together, these chapters create a comprehensive picture of death, resurrection, and judgment that addresses both our cosmic curiosity and our personal anxieties. What makes An-Nasiyat's contribution particularly valuable is its emphasis on the same divine power operating in both natural processes and resurrection. When other chapters describe Allah as He who gives life to the dead earth, they're drawing the same connection between observable natural cycles and the promised resurrection. The spring rain that brings dead soil back to life becomes a daily reminder of the greater awakening that awaits all souls. The theme of spiritual equality introduced in Abasa resonates throughout numerous other chapters. The story of the blind man who was initially overlooked connects to the broader Quranic principle that the most honored among you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous. This same theme appears when the Quran criticizes those who turn away from orphans, when it elevates the status of the oppressed, and when it warns against judging people by their external circumstances. The correction given to the Prophet in Abasa also connects to other moments where divine guidance refines human judgment. The story of Khidr and Moses in Surah Al-Kahf shows how divine wisdom often appears to contradict human understanding. The account of the believers who wanted to pray facing Jerusalem being redirected toward Mecca demonstrates how spiritual growth sometimes requires abandoning our initial assumptions. These stories collectively teach us that divine perspective consistently transcends human perspective. The agricultural imagery in Abasa links to a vast network of verses throughout the Quran that use natural processes to illustrate spiritual truths. The parable of the good word being like a good tree in Surah Ibrahim, the description of believers as seeds that send forth their shoots in Surah Al-Fath, and the comparison of the Quran itself to rain that brings forth vegetation all draw from the same metaphorical well. This agricultural symbolism serves multiple purposes across the Quran. It reminds us of our dependence on divine providence, illustrates how spiritual growth requires both divine grace and human effort, and provides concrete images for abstract spiritual realities. When Abasa lists grapes, olives, and date palms, it's not just describing divine generosity. It's using familiar images to help us understand unfamiliar spiritual truths. The cosmic imagery in At-Takwir connects to the broader Quranic theme of signs in the universe pointing to divine reality. The detailed descriptions of natural phenomena in chapters like Ar-Rahman, the cosmic oaths in chapters like Ash-Shams and Al-Layl, and the creation accounts in various chapters all serve to expand our awareness of the sacred nature of existence. What makes At-Takwir's contribution unique is its focus on cosmic transformation rather than cosmic stability. While many chapters use the regularity of natural processes to demonstrate divine reliability, At-Takwir reminds us that even the most stable-seeming features of our universe are ultimately temporary. This provides crucial balance, preventing us from becoming too attached to any earthly reality, no matter how permanent it appears. The theme of divine justice that runs through all three chapters connects to one of the most consistent messages in the entire Quran. The account of Pharaoh's downfall in An-Natsiyah links to similar stories of divine justice in chapters like Hud, Ash-Shu'ara, and Al-Qasas. The promise of accountability in At-Takwir echoes themes found in Al-Zilzala, Al-Qur'an, and dozens of other chapters. But this isn't just about punishment for wrongdoing. It's about the fundamental moral structure of reality itself. The Quran consistently presents a universe where actions have consequences, where justice may be delayed but is never denied, and where both individual choices and cosmic forces are guided by divine wisdom. The theme of choice within divine sovereignty that appears in these chapters connects to one of the most sophisticated theological concepts in the Quran. The tension between human responsibility and divine control that we see in At-Takwir's closing verses appears throughout the text, creating a nuanced understanding of free will that avoids both fatalism and the illusion of complete human autonomy. This theme helps explain why these chapters can simultaneously describe divine forces controlling everything while still holding humans accountable for their choices. We're not puppets, but we're also not independent agents. We're conscious participants in a cosmic drama, where our choices matter precisely because they occur within a framework of divine guidance and constraint. These universal themes transform how we read not just these 3 chapters but the entire Qur'an, revealing the intricate unity underlying its diverse content. Now that we've explored these profound chapters together, it's time to turn inward and allow their truths to illuminate our own spiritual landscape. The real power of these verses isn't just in understanding them intellectually, but in letting them serve as mirrors that reflect back the condition of our own hearts and the direction of our own lives. As you consider the opening verses of An-Nazi'at describing souls being pulled out violently or taken gently, ask yourself, what is the current state of my relationship with the spiritual dimension of existence? Am I someone who would resist the natural flow of spiritual transition? Or have I cultivated enough inner peace and surrender that even difficult passages feel guided by divine mercy? This isn't about predicting the future, it's about honestly assessing where we stand right now in our spiritual development. Think about the times in your life when you faced major transitions, changing jobs, moving homes, ending relationships, beginning new chapters. How did you respond to these smaller rehearsals for the ultimate transition? Did you cling desperately to what was ending? Or were you able to trust in divine wisdom even when you couldn't see the full picture? Our patterns in smaller transitions often reveal how prepared we are for larger ones. The story of Moses and Pharaoh in An-Nazi'at raises uncomfortable questions about power and humility in our own lives. Consider the areas where you hold authority, perhaps in your family, your workplace, your community. Do you use this authority as a trust from God, recognizing that all power ultimately belongs to the divine? Or do you sometimes fall into Pharaoh's trap of believing that your position makes you fundamentally superior to others? Reflect honestly on how you respond when your authority is challenged or questioned. Do you become defensive and dig in deeper like Pharaoh gathering his people to affirm his status? Or do you remain open to the possibility that the challenge might contain wisdom you need to hear? The spiritual test isn't whether we have power, but how we hold it and how we respond when it's questioned. The correction given to the prophet in Abasa offers perhaps the most searching questions for contemporary reflection. Look at your own patterns of attention and priority. Who gets your best energy, your most careful listening, your most patient teaching? Is it those who can offer you something in return, advancement, recognition, social status, or is it those who genuinely seek what you have to offer, regardless of what they can give back? This principle extends far beyond formal teaching or leadership roles. Parents might ask themselves whether they give equal spiritual attention to all their children, or whether they unconsciously favor those who reflect well on them. Students might consider whether they engage most deeply with ideas that enhance their reputation or with truths that genuinely challenge their growth. Even in casual conversations, we might notice whether we're more present with people who impress us than with those who simply need what we could offer. The agricultural imagery in Abasa invites reflection on gratitude and recognition of divine providence in our daily lives. When you eat your meals today, will you remember the cosmic forces that made them possible? The sun that powered photosynthesis, the rain that nourished growth, the soil that provided nutrients, the countless biological processes that transformed simple elements into complex nourishment. This isn't about becoming obsessive, but about cultivating awareness of how completely we depend on gifts we didn't earn and couldn't create. Consider extending this reflection to other areas where you might take divine providence for granted. The breath entering and leaving your lungs right now, the heartbeat maintaining your circulation, the immune system protecting you from countless threats. These aren't just biological processes, but ongoing manifestations of the same creative power that splits the earth and brings forth vegetation. The cosmic transformations described in At-Takwir challenge us to examine what we're building our sense of security upon. What are the suns and mountains in your life, the things that seem so permanent and reliable that you can't imagine existing without them? Your health, your relationships, your career, your financial stability, your reputation, your mental abilities. While it's natural and wise to care for these gifts, are you holding them lightly enough that their inevitable changes won't devastate your inner peace? This reflection isn't meant to create anxiety, but to help you identify where your ultimate trust really lies. The person whose deepest security rests in divine reality can weather the loss of temporary securities with grace, while the person whose entire sense of self depends on changeable circumstances lives in constant vulnerability. The closing verses of At-Takwir raise the most fundamental question of all: are you someone who wills to walk straight? This isn't asking whether you're perfect, none of us are, but whether your deepest intention is aligned with truth and righteousness. When you make mistakes, do you acknowledge them and adjust course, or do you rationalize and continue in directions you know aren't serving your highest good? These reflection questions aren't meant to be answered once and forgotten. They're invitations to ongoing self-examination that can deepen your spiritual awareness and guide your choices in the direction of greater wisdom and compassion. Understanding these profound truths is only the beginning. The real transformation happens when we allow these insights to reshape how we live each day. These chapters don't just offer us knowledge to contemplate. They provide practical guidance for navigating the complexities of modern life with spiritual wisdom and divine perspective. The awareness of cosmic forces described in An-Natzid can fundamentally change how we approach daily challenges. When you're facing a difficult decision at work, remember that the same divine power that governs the movement of celestial bodies is also guiding the circumstances of your life. This doesn't mean you should be passive, but rather that you can make your choices with confidence, knowing that your sincere efforts are part of a larger cosmic order that ultimately serves divine purposes. Practically, this might mean starting your day with a moment of recognition that you're participating in something much larger than your individual concerns. Before checking your phone or diving into your to-do list, take a breath and remember that the same creative force that maintains planetary orbits is also sustaining your life and providing opportunities for growth and service. The lesson about spiritual priorities from Abasa can revolutionize how you allocate your time and attention. Create a practice of regularly asking yourself, who are the blind seekers in my life? The people who genuinely want to learn and grow but might not have much to offer me in worldly terms. These might be your children, when they interrupt important work with questions, elderly neighbors who need assistance, colleagues who seek mentorship, or anyone whose spiritual hunger is greater than their social status. Implement a weekly practice of intentionally serving or teaching someone who cannot repay you. This could be volunteering with literacy programs, mentoring someone in your field, visiting elderly relatives, or simply giving your full presence to people who are often overlooked. The goal isn't to earn spiritual merit, but to train your heart to recognize divine priorities over social conventions. The agricultural imagery in Abasa offers practical guidance for cultivating gratitude and environmental consciousness. Before each meal, take a moment to trace your food back to its sources, not just the store where you bought it, but the soil, water, and sunlight that made it possible. This simple practice can transform eating from unconscious consumption into conscious participation in divine providence. Extend this awareness to your environmental choices. When you see the verses describing how we split the earth in clefts and bring forth grains and fruits, let this inspire more thoughtful consumption. Choose foods that honor the natural processes described in these verses. Reduce waste that disrespects the cosmic generosity being celebrated. Support agricultural practices that work in harmony with divine natural systems rather than against them. The cosmic perspective from At-Takwir can provide practical tools for dealing with anxiety and stress. When you're overwhelmed by problems that seem insurmountable, remember the image of stars falling and mountains moving like clouds. If cosmic forces of this magnitude are temporary, surely your current difficulties are also temporary and manageable within the divine plan. Create a daily practice of cosmic perspective meditation. When stress builds throughout your day, take a moment to mentally zoom out from your immediate concerns to remember your place in the larger universe. Your deadline, your conflict, your financial worry, these are real and deserve attention, but they're also temporary blips in a cosmic story much larger and more beautiful than you can currently see. The emphasis on accountability throughout these chapters can guide practical decision-making. Before making significant choices, ask yourself, how will this decision look when all hidden things are made manifest? This isn't about fear-based decision-making, but about choosing actions you can stand behind when all pretense is stripped away. Implement a weekly practice of honest self-examination. Review your actions, words, and intentions from the past week. Where did you act from your highest values, and where did you fall short? This isn't for self-criticism, but for course correction. The person who regularly adjusts their direction based on honest reflection won't be shocked by ultimate accountability. The theme of resurrection can provide practical hope during periods of despair or stagnation. When your spiritual life feels dead, when your relationships seem beyond repair, when your circumstances appear hopeless, remember that the same power capable of raising the dead is available to resurrect whatever needs new life in your current situation. Create practical rituals of renewal in your life. This might mean setting aside time each month to reflect on areas that need resurrection, relationships that need healing, dreams that need reviving, habits that need transformation. Approach these areas with the confidence that divine power specializes in bringing new life to what appears dead. The correction of priorities demonstrated in these chapters can guide how you structure your schedule and commitments. Regularly evaluate whether your calendar reflects divine values or merely social expectations. Are you giving your best energy to what matters most spiritually? Or are you exhausting yourself on what impresses others? These practical implementations aren't additional burdens to add to your life. They're ways of infusing your existing activities with the spiritual awareness these chapters cultivate. The goal is not to become perfect, but to become increasingly aligned with the cosmic truths these verses reveal. As we near the end of our journey through these profound chapters, let's distill the essential messages that can serve as guiding lights for the rest of our lives. These aren't just abstract theological concepts, but practical wisdom that can transform how we understand ourselves, our relationships, and our place in the cosmic order. The first and perhaps most transformative takeaway is the reality of divine agency in every aspect of existence. The forces described in An-Naziat, those that pull out and gently take, that swim along and press forward, aren't distant cosmic phenomena unrelated to our daily experience. They represent the continuous divine activity that sustains every breath we take, every heartbeat, every moment of consciousness. This awareness can fundamentally shift us from feeling like isolated individuals struggling against an indifferent universe to recognizing ourselves as participants in a purposeful cosmic symphony. When you internalize this truth, anxiety loses much of its power over you. The same intelligence that maintains planetary orbits and seasonal cycles is also orchestrating the circumstances of your life. This doesn't guarantee that everything will be easy or pleasant, but it does mean that nothing happens outside the scope of divine wisdom and care. Your challenges become opportunities for growth rather than evidence of cosmic indifference. The second crucial takeaway emerges from the spiritual priorities revealed in Abasa. Sincerity of seeking matters infinitely more than social status or worldly achievement. In a culture obsessed with credentials, connections, and appearances, this principle offers radical freedom. Your worth in the divine calculus isn't determined by your resume, your bank account, or your social media following, but by the authenticity of your spiritual hunger and the genuineness of your desire to grow. This truth liberates you from the exhausting game of constantly trying to impress others or position yourself for worldly advantage. Instead, you can focus your energy on the real work of spiritual development, becoming more compassionate, more honest, more generous, more humble. The person who approaches life with the eager humility of the blind seeker will receive divine attention and guidance regardless of their external circumstances. The third takeaway is the temporary nature of all earthly securities, as vividly illustrated in At-Takwir's cosmic transformations. Everything you might be tempted to rely on for ultimate security, your health, your relationships, your career, your finances, even the physical universe itself, is subject to change and ultimate dissolution. This isn't a depressing truth, it's a liberating one that frees you from the futile attempt to find permanent security in impermanent things. When you truly accept the temporary nature of worldly securities, you can enjoy them without clinging to them, appreciate them without depending on them for your deepest peace. This doesn't mean becoming passive or careless with your responsibilities, but rather holding all earthly blessings lightly while investing your ultimate trust in divine reality alone. The fourth key takeaway is the certainty of moral accountability woven throughout all three chapters. Your choices matter not because arbitrary rules have been imposed from outside, but because moral consequences are built into the fabric of reality itself. The person who lives with conscious awareness of ultimate accountability makes different choices than someone who imagines their actions have no lasting consequences. This awareness naturally leads to greater integrity in both public and private behavior. When you remember that all hidden things will eventually be made manifest, you're motivated to align your private thoughts and actions with your highest values. This isn't fear-based morality. It's the natural response to recognizing that reality itself has a moral structure that rewards goodness and exposes falsehood. The fifth takeaway is the profound mercy embedded in divine correction, as demonstrated in the gentle redirection given to the prophet in Abasa. Even when we make mistakes in our spiritual priorities or judgment, divine guidance comes not as harsh condemnation but as loving course correction designed to help us grow. This knowledge allows you to approach your own mistakes with neither denial nor despair, but with grateful receptivity to the wisdom they can provide. When you mess up, and you will, you can view these experiences as opportunities for divine teaching rather than evidence of personal failure. The same mercy that guided the prophet through his moment of human oversight is available to guide you through yours. The sixth and final takeaway is the integration of cosmic awareness with intimate personal care. These chapters seamlessly weave together the grandest cosmic themes with the most personal human moments, showing us that divine attention encompasses both the movement of galaxies and the interaction between a prophet and a blind seeker. You are simultaneously part of a cosmic drama of unimaginable scope, and the beloved focus of intimate divine care. This paradox resolves the false choice between feeling cosmically insignificant or assuming the universe revolves around your personal concerns. You matter tremendously in the divine plan, not because you're the center of everything, but because you're a unique and irreplaceable note in the cosmic symphony. Your individual growth, choices, and service contribute to something infinitely larger than yourself while remaining deeply personal and meaningful. These takeaways aren't meant to be memorized and forgotten, but to be lived and integrated until they become natural ways of seeing and responding to life's daily opportunities and challenges. As we reach the end of our time together today, let's pause and reflect on the remarkable journey we've taken through these three interconnected chapters. We began with cosmic imagery that stretched our imaginations beyond the familiar boundaries of earthly existence, moved through intimate human moments that revealed divine priorities, and concluded with visions of ultimate transformation that put all of life into proper perspective. The beauty of studying the Qur'an in this way, slowly, thoughtfully, with attention to both detail and broader meaning, is that it allows these eternal truths to settle into our hearts rather than simply passing through our minds. You've not just learned about these chapters, you've entered into conversation with them, allowed them to question your assumptions, and opened yourself to the transformation they offer. Think about where you were when we began this exploration together. Perhaps you came with specific questions about death and resurrection, or curiosity about Islamic perspectives on social justice, or simply a desire to understand these ancient texts that have shaped so many lives across so many centuries. Whatever brought you here, you're leaving with something more than information. You're carrying insights that can continue to unfold and deepen throughout your life. The cosmic forces described in An-Naziat aren't just theological concepts to contemplate, they're realities operating in your life right now. As you go about your daily activities, working, eating, resting, relating to others, remember that you're participating in processes guided by the same divine wisdom that governs the movement of planets and the changing of seasons. This awareness can transform even mundane tasks into opportunities for conscious participation in the cosmic order. The lesson about spiritual priorities from Abasa offers you a lifelong practice of noticing who and what receives your attention. Every day will present you with opportunities to choose between impressing the influential and serving the sincere. These choices might seem small: how you respond to interruptions, whom you prioritize in conversations, where you invest your emotional energy. But they're actually shaping your spiritual character in ways that align you either with divine values or worldly conventions. The visions of transformation in At-Takwir provide ongoing perspective for navigating the inevitable changes and challenges of life. When you face losses, transitions, or uncertainties, remember that even the most stable features of the physical universe are temporary. This isn't meant to make you feel insecure, but to help you find your deepest security in spiritual realities that transcend all earthly changes. But perhaps the most important thing you're taking with you is a deepened appreciation for the Qur'an as a living text that speaks directly to contemporary hearts and minds. These aren't just historical documents from a distant culture. They're ongoing revelations that continue to offer guidance, comfort, and challenge to anyone willing to engage with them thoughtfully. This engagement doesn't require you to be a scholar or to have years of formal training. It requires only what you've demonstrated today: an open heart, a curious mind, and the patience to allow these profound truths to work their way into your understanding gradually. The blind seeker who approached the Prophet with such spiritual hunger represents the attitude that makes all spiritual learning possible. As you continue your exploration of the Qur'an, whether through formal study, personal reflection, or conversations with others, remember that each chapter, each verse, each phrase contains layers of meaning that can continue to unfold throughout your lifetime. The chapters we've studied today will reveal new insights as you encounter different life experiences, face new challenges, and reach deeper levels of spiritual maturity. Don't feel pressure to implement everything we've discussed immediately or perfectly. Spiritual growth, like agricultural growth described in Abasa, happens gradually through the consistent application of divine grace to human effort. Choose one or two practices that resonated most deeply with you today, and allow them to take root in your daily routine. As these become natural parts of your life, other insights and practices will naturally follow. Remember too that this kind of study is meant to be shared. The corrections and insights you've gained today aren't just for your personal benefit. They're meant to overflow into your relationships and community involvement. The person who truly understands divine priorities naturally becomes more attentive to the overlooked, more generous with the seeking, more patient with those who struggle. The cosmic perspective these chapters provide can help you navigate our current global challenges with both realism and hope. Climate change, social inequality, political turmoil, technological disruption, all of these can feel overwhelming from a purely human perspective. But when you remember that you're part of a cosmic drama guided by divine wisdom and moving toward ultimate justice, you can engage with these challenges as opportunities for meaningful service rather than sources of despair. As you close this session and return to your daily activities, carry with you the confidence that you're not navigating life alone. The same divine forces that will ultimately resurrect the dead are available to breathe new life into whatever areas of your existence most need renewal and growth. May these eternal truths continue to illuminate your path, and may your journey of discovery bring you ever closer to the wisdom, peace, and purpose that these beautiful chapters reveal. Alhamdulillah, for this time together with the Qur'an. May these verses bring you calm and deeper understanding. Before you go, remember to subscribe and click the bell so you never miss a new reading. And share this session with someone who needs a moment of peace today.